I'd like to call this meeting of the March 14th Finance Committee of the Beaufort County School Board to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just a reminder, I will be making or seconding motions as chair per policy. Do we have a motion to approve today's agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All right. And is there any discussion?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I would like to add to the agenda a brief discussion of the RFP committee for the annual audit.
Okay. Second? Okay. All those in favor? Unanimous. Why don't we place that first in the order today, and we'll tackle it first, after, of course, public comments. We have public comments. Rich, busy.
My name is Richard Busy, I think as you all know. We now have an official report from our CFO showing expenditures for the Leader in Me program, $353,000. And of course, this does not include all of the 6 years that the program has been in existence. 6 schools participate in the program, which does date back to 2013. And since we only have financial numbers covering 18 months, one can only speculate as to how much has been spent in total on this program since its inception here 6 years ago. We can assume that it's in the millions. But whatever the number is, it's a huge number. And one administrator, in fact, shared with a board member recently that their school only spent $10,000 a year on this program. Well, the official numbers tell a different story. And these expenditures represent a fraction of what is being spent on software licenses and technology programs, all intended to improve academics. I understand that the chair has requested information on this topic months ago, but she's still waiting on that information. I was at Whale Branch Middle School on Monday for a tour, and I couldn't help but see all the banners decorating the hallway with all of the trite slogans: win-win, be proactive, synergize. So I pulled Mr. Lawton aside, the principal, and asked him if they participated in the Leader in Me program, because I didn't think they were a participant, and sure enough, his answer was no. He explained simply that he had read the book last summer, he enjoyed the book, and he decided to make it a mandatory student reading assignment for all the kids, and he spends, as he told me, $0 on the program. So hats off to Mr. Lawton. He probably understands that 8 slogans will not begin to solve the achievement gap. Now, I know that this is the Finance Committee, but I did want to share with you the South Carolina Ready scores from the last 3 years for 4 of the 6, I only have 5 copies. 4 of the 6 participating schools, because 2 of the schools just recently started the program, so there's really nothing to look at. Robert Smalls and Battery Creek have just begun that process. A community member told the school board just last week that the program Leader in Me is not an academic program. Well, when you read all of the material online, it is about culture and leadership and self-esteem, which of course is supposed to lead to improved academic performance. So make no mistake, it is an academic program. Why would Mr. Cox focus on the Leader in Me when he was explaining to the board just a few weeks ago how his school was dealing with the achievement gap? He spent the better part of his presentation on the Leader in Me. But first things first, before becoming a leader, you do have to know how to read and write. So let me just finish by saying the question for the Finance Committee is real simple. Is this expenditure, which we know is well in excess of $353,000, a prudent way to spend taxpayer dollars. The most important instrument you have as a committee and the board, of course, is that you have the power of the purse.
Thank you, I like that, power of the purse. Power of the purse. Next speaker, Mike Gleason. Thanks, Rich.
Good afternoon, everybody. As I mentioned before, my background is about 34 years in banking. And my topic is regarding the audit and my own personal experience with audits, because I've been audited several times, okay? Now, first of all, and this is really with all due respect to Ms. Crosby, please, okay? I mean, with all due respect. Just go back Enron, if you remember that accounting scandal. And obviously you remember 2008, there were scandals with rating companies, CPAs, etc. And I would also remind you about Brandon Thomas, the former CFO of Berkeley County, who's currently serving, I believe, 5 years for his fraud. So things happen, it's just that kind of world. Where I come from, we always had an audit committee. It may have been comprised of a couple of board members and some outside interested parties, maybe shareholders. They control the whole thing, okay? Because when you think about it, it's a matter of common sense. Who's getting audited, okay? The CFO in the finance department, or whatever you want to call it, they're the subject of the audit, okay? So it's a little incredible and creates conflict of interest when the selection of the outside auditor is controlled or influenced in any way by the CFO. Basically, it's common sense 101. Okay, you don't pick your own auditor to pick what, you know, to pick who you want to. And also the auditor gets their direction from whoever hired them. Keep that in mind. The audit committee handled all advertising and selection. And so just word for the wise. You want to keep my conflicts of interest because they're killers. So there can be. I mean, it's not, everybody's not a thief, okay? But everybody is presumed to be a thief when it comes down to an audit. Just a quick note on the Leader and Me. It reminds me of like a Wall Street Journal subscription I used to have. Okay, it comes all the time. It never stops. Okay, and it's also very expensive. So you know, you can read the Wall Street Journal once a week, twice a week. So I just decided to start reading books and maybe drop a subscription. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mike. Here you go, Robin, there's Corey. All right, let's move on to the next topic on the agenda, our newly added topic, the RFP committee. Dick, do you want to start since you initiated the addition?
Yes.
Okay.
We are at a point where the facts are we only have 2 firms that responded to our request for proposal. There are more than 2 audit firms out there, but you can't force people to respond to an RFP. So perhaps the RFP wasn't crafted properly, perhaps it was dropped at the wrong time, perhaps the 2 that we have, we know for a fact, if you looked at the proposals, that one of the firms, which I will not mention, didn't give a proposal that needed the requirements of the RFP. That's problematic. So if that being problematic, that leaves us 1 firm. That is not a good idea. You know, we should have at least 3 firms that we look at. Now, so where are we at now? What can we do now? Well, right now, it's getting late in the year. If we submit another RFP now to different audit firms, they are in the middle of tax season. What are our chances of getting the RFPs, getting 3 new ones at this time with a very short suspense? So, I think we might have to consider doing something else, because we have to get a firm The existing firm, which we've had for how long, 5 years? 5 years. Will, in our contract, I understand there was an option for at least 1 to 2 years more, a year at a time.
2 1-year
Two
extensions
1-year
or
extensions.
possible.
1-year extensions. I would like the committee to consider that we simply go to their audit firm, tell them that we would like them to extend their contract for 1 year. And then this committee with the finance department sits down at an earlier date in the year, say December, November, in there. So we can get the RFP out, we can get a reasonable amount of time to get responses back, and we cast a wider net. I think we have to, if we have to cast out of state, we cast out of state. But we can't not do an audit.
Correct.
And I don't think we really have any other choice but to extend the current contract. So that's my opinion, and that's why I brought it up.
Okay. Rachel, did you wanna add anything to that?
I think Dick's right. I'm not comfortable with just having the choices that we did have in the situation that arose. I'm trying to, of course, be careful what I say and, it's a curious situation to be in, but, I would like more selection, more competition, and it did concern me that the report that was provided didn't follow the guidelines and parameters that we set forth, so.
Correct, I concur. I'd like to ask Tanya, to tell us about the challenges of resubmitting, putting out the, RFP again at this late hour. So,
Definitely a challenge. We're already very late in the game. We're in mid-March. Generally, we've selected someone in January. Auditors have to build that into a schedule. And the timing, there is at least a week. For a new firm, it would probably be 2 weeks in the spring, and generally we've had auditors on site, during the, last week of May or so. So we're getting up very close to that date. And having not been on a schedule for a couple of months now, would put us at a disadvantage. We'll be playing catch up, and we'll be probably scrambling to get information very quickly and get them acclimated, get a new firm acclimated to our processes and our account structure and our staff and all of that. So, it would be very difficult, and, working in a CPA firm for several years, this is crunch time in a CPA firm, and even though it's an audit firm, they also do taxes, and they're in the height of their, tax season at this time. So I think we would be lucky to get one
at this point.
response if we went out for bid again.
Okay. Rachel.
Can I ask a question? So do you think then utilizing the same firm, extending that contract for just that 1-year time period, since they are already privy to our processes and they understand, now I know they're not anticipating us to ask them that, but because of their knowledge already, do you think that would be a wise decision because we're so late in the game right now?
I do believe it's a wise decision. I know I believe the board is interested in moving to a different firm, but in the situation we're in at this time, I think that is the best solution.
And if I may, I wanna explain the reason for the delay. There's not just one, there were multiple along the way. The process actually started before the holidays under Mr. Strivinger's finance committee at that time. Mr. Strivinger was chair. And then we hit the holidays, and then we seated a new board, and then it took a little bit of time, not a long time, but to reformulate the committees. So by the time we actually had a new finance committee in place, we were well into January at that point. Then, we had some questions about what was the proper process, okay? Was it appropriate for a board committee to, participate in this? And if so, had it been done before? How was it done? Et cetera, et cetera. So there were a number of factors that delayed this process. So I agree with what Mr. Dyer and Mrs. Wisniewski are saying. Do we have a motion as a recommendation to the board, because obviously we can't make that decision as a committee, so.
I move that we hire our existing audit firm to do a 1-year extension on our contract.
Okay.
Would you like to add in the part about, beginning the process of looking for that?
And beginning the process in the fall of next year.
Earlier,
To
yeah.
find another firm.
Robin, are you clear on the wording of that motion? What do
Motion
you
to hire
have?
existing audit firm for 1 year and beginning the process in the fall of next year, 2019.
Mhm. The RFP process, a new firm. Okay, we have, is there a second on that second? Okay, now again, this is a recommendation. David?
I was just gonna say, you
Yeah.
might wanna change the wording to
To
you're
a
recommending to the board.
Right,
Yes,
recommending
yes.
to the board.
Yeah.
If I may,
Yes.
we may wanna have some wording to recommend to cancel the bid.
All right, let's do that as a separate motion.
Okay.
It'll be less complicated, but I agree.
Right.
All right, got it, Robin? Let's call for the vote. All in favor? All right, we're bringing that recommendation forward. Now, it was unanimous, but our policy says we only need a majority, and it goes straight to consent. So, the-
All actions coming from committee right now is going under committee, so nothing is going under consent. The
okay,
chair has had every action that's coming out of committee. When you make your committee report, I'm putting all action, when you look, so that,
yes,
as the finance reports on, you're going ahead and
We
going
can
in to
bring
take
the
the.
motion up at that time.
You would bring the motion up at that time.
Chair
So
can-
that's
The chair can
what-
table policy.
So, there's nothing going on consent as currently, even though everything is
Mhm.
unanimous, nothing is going on consent.
I do have a question about that, because that's not how our policies are written. And until they're changed, we do have to follow the existing policies as they lie. Otherwise, I would assume we all have the freedom to do how we please.
I'm putting this motion up
Okay.
under.
Yeah,
the
I
finance
just wanna go on record of my, my dispute with that. Okay, Rachel.
Then I'd like to move that to cancel the current RFP for the auditor, process.
I second the motion.
Mm-hmm.
Recommending to cancel.
Recommend.
Recommending to cancel the current RFP.
Two quick things.
Yeah.
You're correct about the policy requiring that it go to consent, so either gotta change the policy or somebody should make a motion to the full board to suspend the rules,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, if you're gonna cancel the RFP for this year, if you do not commence a new RFP process before the end of the calendar year, we have to change the policy. Because the policy says that the board will conduct an RFP process every 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So either change the policy or make sure that we
Right.
start the RFP process this year.
We always started
Yeah.
early in December, usually goes out early December.
Gotcha. Okay,
Good.
thank you for the input. All right, all in favor of the motion? Okay, unanimous. I do have a process question on the placement on the agenda, but that can certainly wait till our board meeting Tuesday night when that comes up. So I won't add any more on that topic at this time. Are there any other comments or, points to be included in this RFP, discussion? That's it? All right. Tanya, anything? Okay. Let's move on to the next topic, which is, our approval of our February 14th committee meeting minutes. Now, I'm gonna give the, committee members just a couple of minutes to look at them. We got them relatively
That's updated, right?
late in the day, and, so bear with us a moment. We are going to, take a few minutes and put our eyes to these minutes, so. Robin, when were the last edits made to that? Were there any submitted by board members today?
Not by board members, Tanya has made some.
Tanya, okay.
Typographical edits that I made and stuff, and some
Alright.
words.
Are they
Letters.
in the hard copy?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Here they are. Alright.
So there were typos.
Okay, typos. Robin, I remember Joe Crowley was with us. He is a member of the news media. And,
Okay.
and I know sometimes you include news media members in the others present, so,
And I don't know him, so I would put him
Okay.
in, so he's,
understood.
okay.
He's with the,
Low Country?
yeah, he's
Okay.
Low Country, yes. Excellent. Dick, I just have a question for you. Under future agenda topics, we referenced the, achievement gap. Did you want to use that as a future topic for discussion, or just the financial piece?
Just the
And then
finan-
give
just-
the gap.
Just the
Okay.
financial piece of that.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify, no problem. Alright, I'm looking over prior to coming tonight. Rachel, have you had, I know
Yeah,
you've been at
I'm
2
here.
days at the Capitol. Take your time, we'll give you a few minutes there.
I think it's good. I did look over it earlier, but I wanted to make sure there was no substantial
Yes.
changes to what I've seen before.
Oh, it sounds good, and Robin, will you commit to us, please, that next time we'll get our minutes a little sooner, so we have
I will
adequate
get them,
time?
yes, I'll commit to get them a little sooner.
Thank you,
Is this the updated
thank
one?
you very much.
I move that
Did I
we
not?
accept the minutes of the February 14th Finance Committee.
Second?
Alright, all in favor of the approving the minutes? Okay, unanimous. Okay. Moving ahead to the Leader in Me program. We had, one of our, one aspect of our finance committee scope is that all community member requests for information to our finance department will funnel through the finance committee, barring anything that would, require document production, which would need to be filed separately as a FOIA, request to the department. The request was submitted by Mrs. Busy, who's in attendance tonight, and Mrs. Crosby has responded, and I'll let Mrs. Crosby add any additional information she may have at this time, and then we can discuss.
So we gathered information that was readily available to us, and for Leader in Me, it is, the Leader in Me program is a specialized program. We don't necessarily, distinguish it in a certain segment of our account numbers, so it's a little more challenging to pull data than other areas. We can certainly add a project code called Leader in Me and track it going forward. We cannot go back into the past in prior years to modify that, but going forward, we can certainly use that as a way to track it as we do Summer Institute, some other areas, and that might be something we should consider. So as you can see, Mr. Busy mentioned that it was 6 years. It's actually 8 years of information, because CUSA started 8 years ago. So it is, and I had mentioned in an email, I believe, that we would go back. I provided 2 years because those were readily available. If we do go back to the inception, that will be 6 additional years of data that we'll pull. 2 years, since in the last 2 years, we have automated our systems where we're scanning information in and copies of receipts and invoices and backup documentation into our system. Everything else is hard copy and is paper. So, and may be in the building depending on the number of years. Generally, we keep at least 3 years, prior information in the building. So, for that reason, we did, contact all the schools, gain their, assistance with this project. You not only look in the, P-card report, but we also may have check data, so we have to look in multiple places for the information, piece it together, ensure it's not duplicated, and gather that information. So, so I had a staff member, compile the information, and, so this is 2 years of information. The programs initially began with a grant. The Joint Strike Initiative, it was a DoD grant that was military impacted schools, and CUSA was one of the schools, and Shanklin was as well. I don't know if, the grant ended probably 3 or more years ago, so I don't recall, the specifics of which schools were involved in that. But the grant did eventually end, and, the schools felt that it was valuable enough to continue. And so through the school expenditures, through their allocations, they may be grant funds such as Title I, and many schools may fund it, or other mechanisms for funding at a school level. ISD on the report is Instructional Services Division. This would be budgeted at the district office level, and we do budget for choice programs at the district office. So schools that are unable to fund it may be supported by the district office expenditures. So we separated those out and then combined them in total for the 2 years of spending there. So you'll see $194,000 in 2018 and another $158,000. So this is, majority of the spending is on the P card, but there is some additional that includes travel in this report.
But it's budgeted, correct? It's budgeted under professional development funds, and
Well-
it's projected to the ISD and to the schools that they have so many dollars in professional development funds, is that correct?
It's a series of things. There is an annual, I believe it's $13,150 that you see here under ISD expenditures in 2019. Is an annual fee that's required to participate in the program. So that's more of a dues or a sort of thing, or a subscription. Then there are supplies that a school has the option of purchasing. And for example, MC Riley Elementary has an advanced subscription to the program, and we're learning more about this as we go. And so they have an advanced level of subscription, and they buy purchase supplies. And then there is professional development as well. There is a conference that is attended, and they share information, ideas, and present to one another of how they implement it in their schools.
But when you do your budget, you incorporate money for
Yes.
them to use this program and other programs, correct?
At the district office, we do, and then if a school is using the Title I funds to pay for it, we allocate the Title I funds to the school, they submit a plan, and we load a budget, so yes.
Have
If
they
they
ever-
choose to put it in there.
Have they ever broken their budget? Have they ever spent more than it was budgeted?
Loaded question.
That is a loaded question. I am sure that is possible, but, I would have to go back and look at a particular school in a particular area to see. But ultimately, they're responsible for covering the costs of expenses at their school, so.
So my point is that, the finance committee is interested in how the money is spent, only in that it is spent properly, it's allocated to decision makers to spend it properly. I do not believe it is in the finance committee's, purview to say this program is better than that program. That's an academic
Correct.
committee decision. As long as we are staying within the budget, then the details of its effectiveness of how that money is spent, should be an academic, view. Is it worth it academically? I believe that's some of the criticism is what is the academic benefit of spending this amount of money?
So So as I understand it, Mrs. Busy submitted the question, we're now charged with funneling through our committee. And she understood from the outset that we were just to gather the numbers and then to investigate the, efficacy of the program, that would be another committee. So that's already been ironed out. And what this really is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Fran, this is really an audit. This is a full-blown audit of this one program. So it's a substantial request for information. It doesn't seem to fall in the category of a FOIA request.
The question was to pull the data,
Yeah.
how much do we spend? In order to do that, I have to pull documents to get help get the information, because, so I'm not submitting the documents to Ms. Busy, because she hasn't requested them, but it does require accessing those, and this did require substantial time. So
Yes.
maybe that's a question for our general counsel, I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm gonna ask Mrs. Busy a question if I may. You submitted the request, your request was very clear, it's large, now that we understand how far the program goes back. How would you like to proceed?
I think we have enough information based on the 2 years that we have.
To speculate
So I
on?
would be interested.
Is there anything else we can get for you to satisfy your request? At this time?
Not financially, no.
Okay, your larger question goes to how effective it is,
Right.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you sure?
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this particular topic?
If I may,
Yes.
there was a comment made that we don't know how much, it could be millions. We did take a quick glance at additional funding back to 2013 in just the P card area. And the total of all of the years of P card was more in the, was significantly less than $1 million. So I think that was a little, exaggerated. But, I do believe that earlier in the years, the expenses, of course, there were fewer schools participating, so we won't see this level of spending in the earlier years, but, I think that, I can offer that information.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other additional, comments on that? Nothing? Okay. All right, moving on, next topic,
If you're in, board docs, if you refresh, the comparison of purchasing is
Will
in board
do.
docs.
Do we have extras of this document to,
Which one?
the,
Comparison?
yeah, the comparison?
I'll see.
It might, since we don't have it for those watching on here. Tanya, did you do the legwork on this document, or where did it come from? The comparison?
I prepared it.
Okay, thank you. So, the previous finance committee, this is actually a holdover topic. We postponed this for our new finance committee to tackle it, with input from our senior staff and Dr. Berg. And it was all prompted initially, by, discovery of a procurement matrix that we have, okay, which, if you look at your documents under, approval, bear with me a moment. If you take a look at, under superintendent and board approval authority, the, vendor handbook, which I think is your first document in there, and I believe on I wanna say page 6. Okay. this is what it is. It can be found on our Beaufort County School District website. It's a matrix and it's included in our vendor handbook. Matrix of procurement requirements. But it's that last column that sparked everyone's interest, which is approval authority. And various spending thresholds and who is the approval authority for each, okay? And this matrix actually looks at purchases and contracts, I believe. Just purchases. At one point in time, the matrix did include both, but this appears to be our most recent. And as you can see, the board is not really a participator in there. They're referenced twice, and you know, it may or may not require board approval. So this began a little bit of a conversation, and then let's exit out of that document. And let's move ahead to the document that is called Finance Administrative Rules. Now, on the first page, it's a table of contents. When you open that document up, take a look at C14, purchasing. Scroll down and take a look at Administrative Regulation C14. This, by the way, for those of you watching on, I don't believe this can be located on their district website right now. Somehow I got a copy of it by looking in my old emails going back several years ago. And C14 was created, was first born or adopted on July 12th, 2001. This particular administrative regulation was not edited or revised until June 2015. Okay, just take a look at it briefly. So the next revision date occurs on June 2015. Okay. Now, I'll give you a few minutes.
We're still looking at C14?
Yeah, C14, only C14, that's one, this was a discovery that I stumbled upon that had a profound impact on me, and it resonated with, I think, the old finance committee as well. Alright, so this was the original version of that particular administrative reg. Now go back to your documents, and we're gonna take a look at, OS 13 procurement _ purchasing. Okay. This is the next time this particular reg is revised or edited by district staff. And there's one very large passage, really the main difference if you compare the two, and you can certainly do that on your own time. You have access to both documents. Section 5, delegation of authority to award contracts. This entire Roman numeral 5 passage was added. And it's somewhat misleading because the verbiage, the way it's worded, it gives the reader the opinion that the board delegated to the superintendent the authority to award Beaufort County School District contract for the purchase of equipment, materials, supplies in any amount. In any amount, as long as the purchase is within the remaining funds, etc. Now, this actually raised a few eyebrows. This was not brought before the board for board approval, because at that time, when the administrative regulations were changed by the superintendent, they were not required to be brought before the board, okay? At a later point in time, the board said, hey, we'd like to see all the administrative regulation changes going forward. However, because this one was changed prior to that, it was never brought before the board and shown to the board. And it is, I think it represents a rather significant change. There's also a little wording in the bottom sentence, which is a little bit misleading. It says, for award of the contract by the board in accordance with this policy. It's not a policy, it's a reg. Once again, it misleads the reader as to making them think this was some sort of created board policy. So I would suggest that the committee sit down and really look at C14, the original, and this, and really understand some of the changes that have taken place. But I'm just summarizing, and that section 5 is the big section added. This reg was updated one more time, February 2016. They were minor tweaks. They were mostly title changes, CFO to, CFOO and those types of things. Nothing substantive, nothing significant. So that's just a little bit of background. And Tanya has done a great job, done the legwork, taken a look at other school districts and created a chart, and I hope some of you have it, as to how they approach their various authority levels and dollar thresholds. So, Tanya, I'm gonna let you take it from here if you would. Thank you.
I, of course, wasn't in my current position when
Yes.
that change was made in
Correct.
June, so I don't know the background of, the reasoning, but
Yes.
I have, would like to make one comment about that before I
Yes.
move on to the comparison. The district's procurement code, specifically spells out authorities of the board and authorities of the superintendent. And it states that the board delegates to the superintendent all authority and responsibility for conducting procurement on behalf of the district in a manner consistent with this code and board policy. Superintendent shall be responsible for developing organizational structure and procedures necessary to implement the code. So the procurement code does specifically talk about those the procurement process and delegating all those responsibilities to the board and establishing an org structure, a staff to be able to implement that and manage it. And then the authorities to the board are about promulgating policies regarding governing procurement and management and control. So I think that perhaps there was an attempt to make it in line with the procurement code. So if we do make any changes, I just hope that we'll ensure to reference the procurement code and make sure that we're not doing something that's, contradictory to that, so.
Correct. I also added for everybody's review the state model of the procurement code in South Carolina, as well as our own procurement code. So, and they're pretty big documents, so when you have some spare time, take a look at them, particularly our procurement code. And it really does give the authority to the board. So,
So it doesn't state that, the board can't exert some additional authority that's more stringent than the code, but you can't do anything less stringent than the code, so.
that's right. But my assertion has always been that this is misleading the way it's worded. It almost sounds like the board granted this. We didn't, we really didn't. John, you had your hand up, then I'm gonna go to Dick.
Just a quick question, so that we're all on the same page. The passage you just referenced, when was that last revised?
It was, I believe, 2012's procurement code, so there's no changes since 2012. Since that, date, any changes to the, modifications to the.
7 years ago?
Any changes to any modifications to the procurement code since that date that requires the district to scrap their code and go to the state code, so yes.
Thank you.
We work the budget, and that is really one of the things that we spend a lot of time on, and we go to the board for approval of the budget. Our CEO is responsible for executing that budget. So we're talking about putting further restrictions, I see that some of these other boards and some of these other units,
Yes.
they say unlimited if budgeted. Well, you may not feel completely comfortable with that, but you gotta realize we've already looked at the budget. And we have to trust our CEO to execute the goals of that budget within the budget. However, carte blanche is not a very good idea. And so I believe there should be some limit, but it should be for only major things. And you know, I like what Charleston has as $5 million. I mean, we're really looking at the big ticket items are major construction. And that's gonna be the big ticket stuff, is major construction. I can't think of any other contracts or other things that he could sign that's going to be in the millions of dollars. Can you?
We have certain contractors, for example,
So
our
that's,
maintenance, food service, I can't recall, custodial is in, up there. And we generally take those to the board anyway. There may be we have a substitute system, software system but it's renewing annually, so, we may have a few large ticket items like that. I can't recall any at the moment. We also have, no, I didn't gather exactly what you said on the capital side or construction side. We would make purchases of the student devices and teacher devices, on an annual basis and may renew some of those smaller throughout the year, but every summer, probably in the late spring, we're purchasing those annually, so those will be in the multi-millions, couple million range, but, and then major construction, payment pay apps that are part of the gross, guaranteed maximum price of construction, which is approved by the board as well, so there are a handful, I can't describe exactly how many.
It's just interesting to look at in your comparison to the other districts with huge budget, like sometimes 3 and 4 times our budget, that have unlimited for Buyer level and up for Greenville, unlimited for Richland, unlimited line item in the budget. We have to trust our superintendent, obviously, you know, and if we shackle him, because sometimes you have an opportunity for you get a deal. You know, you'll get an offer from Apple on a price for something, and that's fleeting. You know, you gotta move on it. So I think we should just be careful on what limits we give.
Understood. David had his hand up and then.
I'd just like to add, also consider when you consider emergency procurement issues as well.
Right.
Which could be a big ticket item, with
Yes.
a big storm bringing revenue.
David.
You can certainly suggest a policy that covers emergencies. The old finance committee got to the point where it basically said, I think what Dick was saying, no organization should have an employee who has unlimited signing. And by the time you find out it's a budget variance, it's too late, it's already been signed.
But I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, we also don't wanna shackle them either.
That's where the budget piece goes, because that's the initial shackling in the budget, in the line items in the budget that's approved by the board. But, as David said, you know, do we trust our superintendent that he's going to use within the budget? Pick the right contractor, he's gonna get the lowest price for the best value and so on. If we don't trust him, we have the wrong superintendent.
Who else had their hand? Rachel, did you have your hand up? Okay. Well, go ahead, then I'm gonna get back to the committee. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I was gonna say that, regardless of trust, it still should be numbers to where a number where you cap out where you need to check with the board, because at the end of the day, people elect us, and we're held accountable as board members to however to watch this money, so it's not really about whether I trust him, it's about whether I trust myself. So, you know, I trust myself to make sure to watch and make sure that he doesn't go above and beyond that number, so yeah, it's not about whether we trust him or not. I think it's about making sure there's checks and balances.
I just wanted to give you a reference from the past, okay? Luckily, I'm friendly with some of the previous board members, and I spoke to one and I said, how did we handle the approval of contracts in the past? What have we done? And if you go back to your list of documents in board docs, the BOE agenda 11808, we're going all the way back to 2008. And it's just a sample board agenda, and one of the items the board was set to approve that night, evaluate and approve, was a website design and development contract. It may have been a substantial dollar amount, I have no idea, but it was under board business. And, you know, we've had some inconsistencies in the past that don't, where the board has been asked to approve certain contracts. One in particular I remember, the drug testing contract. For some odd reason, that was brought before the board. So there have been some inconsistencies. I'm not always sure what guidelines we're tied to as a board as to what we have to be presented with. Some of the guidelines I've heard from older board members is that they used to be presented with contracts that only pertain to the performance expectations for the superintendent. So let's say one of the performance expectations was to improve technology across the district. Then they would have contracts brought to the board for approval that pertain to that performance expectation. So, but I have to say, when I look at this chart that Tanya did the legwork on, it looks like a lot of the information is just brought to the board. For example, there's $100,000 threshold that would be brought to the board for information's sake. That seems to be the happy medium. If you've got a board that's divided and that they don't want to shackle the superintendent, at least you're being informed. At least you have an opportunity to raise a few questions, but I think you have to come to what that magic number is. What is that threshold in a budget our size? I mean, my personal opinion is I don't see anything beneath 100,000. I don't. Mr. Dowd.
I hope that, in the context of just monitoring money within the budget, and the word automatic comes to mind, I would hope then that either the board or this committee has a much more in-depth involvement in the creation of the budget, as opposed to the view from 50,000 feet that the board has had over the budget in the past. We currently have a whopping 2 sessions scheduled to talk about the budget. And I'm not sure how the board can achieve enough familiarity with the inner workings of that budget in order to be able to trust anyone to go off carte blanche or within, I think, really reasonable approval levels. That to me is part of our stewardship responsibility.
Thank you, John. Rachel.
I think what you just mentioned kind of hit the nail on the head, and is the happy medium between completely shackling superintendent with their signing authority, and also giving them some discretion, because the information coming to the board is important not only for the board's purposes, but also for the public, and being transparent, and they are able to see what is the superintendent, you know, doing, signing, what are we purchasing, and what is the justification behind those purchases, because I think it's pertinent that we are able to ask those questions of the superintendent, so.
That's a piece that's been missing for a while. I just have a question for Tanya. When we highlighted the Beaufort County School District, are these recommendations in some of the columns, or are they as is what they are right now?
As is what they are right now.
Okay.
Auditing services are required, auditing services, legal services, professional services contract, I can't right off of that. Professional services would be GCA, the food service contract, construction projects and funding. Architects have to be approved by the board. So you'll always see architects, and when we come with your construction projects that require a guaranteed maximum price for either our 8% projects or referendum projects, those are always brought before the board, and, I'm not sure if there's been a vote on them, but it definitely for information through executive session, because it involves contractual information, so those are brought before the board.
Now, I am curious about legal services. Help me out.
It's a contract, if there is a legal services contract, the board must approve it.
How big a contract? Cause I'll be honest with you, I don't recall these,
I
approving
haven't
these contracts.
seen a contract in quite
Yeah.
some time
The
for
lobbying
legal
is just-
services.
the
The lobbying is just
because they're with
services.
McNair, so that there is a contract with them. So that's the only contract that we have, because everyone else is on
An informal,
it's not a contract.
That's
We don't
the
have a
only
contract.
contract.
Fee basis.
Yes,
That's
because
what
no
I'm
formal
trying to-
agreement
good
or
to know.
contract.
Thank you. Thanks, Robin. Thank you. I'd like to bring a recommendation to the board and start the conversation, alright? I lean toward the, what, Horry County has. Well, hold on a second, not Horry, Berkeley, forgive me, Berkeley. And, you know, look, they're, probably a conservative, policy on their part, and I would say that it might be something we would like to adopt as well, but that's just my opinion.
Now, so, let me just make sure, under board,
Berkeley,
Where it
under
says-
board,
yeah, where it says for
Mhm.
us, auditing legal services, professional services, construction projects, that means that it comes to the board.
yes, and we have to approve
And we
it.
have to approve it, and it's at a threshold of,
Well, there is no dollar.
There is no
amount.
dollar amount.
there is no dollar amount, okay.
No dollar amount.
But for all other things, I agree with you that the $100,000 information only makes some sense to me.
It may be a happy medium, and it may be that if we were to bring that to the board may see otherwise.
Yeah.
They may be
Yeah.
more conservative,
Right.
they may be less conservative,
Right.
I don't
Right.
know.
Right.
But we can start the conversation by moving a recommendation out of this committee, Dave,
Say when you do bring it to the board,
yes,
the problem that we've learned with our history is informational purposes doesn't give you any power whatsoever as a board.
correct,
You can't do anything, it's just
has no teeth
informational.
whatsoever.
I mean, you can ask questions, but you can't say, no, you can't do that, we're telling you not to do that. So you have to be careful,
Well, you have to
know,
be clear about
because if
how
you
it's
want
presented.
oversight, it seems like you need the ability to say, no, you can't do that,
Well,
unless you get a better price or whatever, so you can set conditions. If it's information only, you have no power. But
right,
when it comes to the board, that would be the position
Yes.
I would take.
and we learned that with the administrative regs. Our faculty, not our faculty, our staff brings us changes to the regulations. And we can say, oh, we want how much, we agree or disagree with it, it has no teeth. And to this day, I haven't seen a change implemented per board input on any of the rate changes, frankly. So it will have no teeth, but again, this would be a starting point. Do you start off more conservative, or do you start off with a looser position? Dick?
This is gonna be a very important decision,
Absolutely.
because we have new superintendents.
Yes,
That are gonna be coming in, experienced superintendents
right,
that have dealt with other boards, and they're gonna say, wait a minute, if you put too much constraint on him or her, they're gonna say, oh, this is not for me.
mm-hmm,
And maybe
so
that-
we have to be careful, that's all I'm saying, be careful.
That's true.
Rachel, you go first and then we'll go to you.
We do have to be careful not to shackle them, but we also have to be careful not to repeat history.
Exactly.
And we don't have a good track record, and it's not, we don't, it's just as a whole, you know, everybody looks at, with tunnel vision at that one issue. And we do have to keep that at the forefront of our thoughts and making sure that we set a positive tone going forward and gain that trust back.
I don't think anybody would criticize for taking a conservative leaning on this. Will?
All due respect, I understand where Mr. Dye is coming from, but however, I think that I would much rather a conservative or a a more strict opinion, because if you can't handle rules, then maybe this is not for you. Because in the past, we all know that the superintendent has been in control, and therefore the board has to have control. And basically, if the superintendent's still in control, the board members have changed, but the board hasn't changed. So therefore, yes, it's our job, and that's why, me personally, that's why I've been elected. Because in the past, they had not been happy about that, because the senior staff have had, not only the superintendent, senior staff have had too much, will of where they can and cannot do, and they basically have to have dictated what goes on in the district. So therefore, I think we do need to crack the whip, and we do need to be more conservative, and as we work together, and at different times, we can give them, maybe we can loosen the range for certain things, but right now, coming in, no, we need to tighten the range, because we don't know who we're dealing with, we don't know what we're dealing with. So I differ.
Before we continue with more conversation, do we have a motion? We can certainly debate the motion. Do we have a motion regarding, purchases and contracts at a certain dollar threshold put forth?
Madam Chairman, I think that is something that the full board, I don't have a recommendation. I mean, I hear what Will's saying, I agree with what Will's saying, but I don't know what the dollar amount is, and I think that comes from the whole board
You're right.
of what it's going to be. Maybe we could give the whole board a range,
Yes, sir.
you know, say a conservative range and a optimistic range, or whatever, say, we think it should be somewhere between, maybe we could agree on that in this committee,
Right.
what the range is. Maybe.
Rachel?
I would like to see us make a recommendation just to open up the conversation to the
As a
board.
full board?
As a full.
Let me say this, and then we're going to Earl. The way to open up the conversation is with a recommendation.
Okay.
I've seen this topic batted around and around and around for months. This started months ago with our finance committee, Dr. Glass, myself, Mr. Stripinger's chair, and let's move this. Let's find out what the board's will is. The board may discard it. This is a way to get something on the table and open up the dialogue. It's certainly a way to get it on an agenda. I know that much. So, Earl and then David.
I just wanna say this, to get a good superintendent to come into this district, you can't tie his hands, so the board can make sure that we know what's going on. So we can't tie his hands, and for Mr. Smith to say that, people in the administration, the employees of the administration have gotten away with stuff. These folks are hard-working folks, they've been here years. Some of the things that they have to do, you don't have a clue. And I just can't sit here and you criticize these employees.
I'm not criticizing.
No,
You know,
no one's criticizing.
I'm not
Well,
criticizing.
I've gotta move on.
I'm just saying, you know.
David, you're up next.
You know,
Thank you.
criticizing.
I would just suggest that you make a motion that the board develop a policy that puts a range, you know, and limit, and you can give a range. And
Yeah.
if you make that recommendation, then that goes up to the full board. And then develop a policy, it can go to the policy committee. If that's what the chair wants to do.
Rachel.
I was gonna, as an alternative to doing a range, maybe looking at a percent, looking at the total budget amount that we have, since that seems to be one of the, trends, is that they say, you know, if it's not included in the budget or things like that, choosing a percentage as opposed to a range, so that way, you're a little safer possibly, and there's a little bit more wiggle room possibly for the superintendent.
Good idea. All right, my only concern, first of all, I think that's a good idea, the formulation of a policy. You've got how much time left with the policy committee? It may be bounced right back to the finance committee, given the limited time you have left. What's your timetable on that, John?
We have, right now,
Yes.
we have an end date for the ad hoc policy committee of 30 May. That's very aggressive. It's the most polite way I can put it, okay?
Yeah.
It's practically unachievable. So to fit anything in with the magnitude of discussion that this is gonna require, I believe will be difficult. But we would welcome a request, the reason we have a policy committee is to try to do some wordsmithing around it, and so
And check
I don't think it's
legality,
fair
et
to
cetera.
ask you to be doing our work. Tell us what you need for a policy.
Right.
And we will take a whack at it and try to come up with some proper wording for that policy in concert
need
with our
parameters.
council to make sure that it's legal. And that
Right.
allows you to continue focusing on your financial
But you
aspects.
would need parameters.
Pardon me?
You would need parameters.
Yeah, need parameters, yeah, tell us which one. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Just so I understand. How would a proposal like this, and we talk about trusting the superintendent, and we can certainly delegate the administration of the budget to the superintendent, but we cannot delegate the responsibility for the proper spending of that budget to the citizens of the county. We're responsible. Now, how would a proposal like this play against the famous contract for substitute teachers? Would a contract, let's see, what was it, $2 million?
It was over $1 million,
Okay, it was over $1 million, so under something like this, would that be an, oh, by the way, I signed a contract for $1 million and I've given you your information? Or would it be a contract that comes to the vote, for up or down from the
Right,
board?
well, that's what
what
we were questioning, that's what Mr. Stringer was saying. If you just bring it for information, it has no teeth, the board has no real input. You have to make it for approval.
Yeah.
You have to determine the threshold, you want contracts and purchases, and, you know, so, I mean, we're somewhat divided here on the committee. There's no, I can't make the motion, I'm looking for Rachel and Dick to bring something forward to the board, I'm sorry, I'm just following our policy. I don't like that policy, by the way, please change that, but go ahead.
I would just have trouble going to my constituents in District 6 and saying that, hey, don't talk to me about that, I have no power, I have no authority over how money is spent. You know, that doesn't make us look like stewards of the finances.
Tanya, yes, please.
I think one major consideration in this should be the volume of transactions. You may be tying your own hands to lengthy board meetings considering a low dollar threshold like that. But if you are requiring approval, you're going to need contractual information to be able to make those decisions, which will add to your executive sessions. So please consider that, I believe that is a relatively low threshold due to our size, and that could extend, your meetings as well as a large volume and, taxing on the staff to be able to constantly prepare, information. And another point is what information are you looking for? Is it just go on a consent agenda with a vendor name and a dollar threshold, or are you looking for a contract? Are you looking for the details behind it, what it's for, why are we doing this? There's a lot of information, you're gonna be asking a lot of questions about each item if you're gonna approve it, so there's a lot more to each individual purchase than just a vendor name and a number. So, please consider that as well.
Yes.
I think $100,000 may be almost impossible for our staff to be able, current staff at the level we are, to be able to manage to bring to you. And, I mean, I'm almost interested in something higher, and then if you could go, depending on the volume we see, then you could make a decision to go up to a smaller number, but, that number is very, concerning to me.
Yes.
Because I really don't know what that volume is. We can certainly look in our database, of transactions to see, but I don't know what it looks like at this point, so.
Understood, Rachel.
To go to that topic and the threshold, the dollar amount that we would put on it, I hate to just look at this comparison of purchasing authority among these different school districts, just because I know that the demographics can be so different between all the different districts in our state. You know, they might have double the budget that we have, but their demographics could be different, their school choice programs could be different. The amount of schools that they have, that however many K-8, whatever, so I think that plays into determining what your threshold number would even be. So looking at, you know, saying 100,000 and looking at Berkeley County, well, it seems like a good number initially, there could be a lot of thought that went into that number. And I think that it requires a little bit more review, to try to pin a number to it. That's why I suggested the percentage, just because I thought that might be an easier route to go.
That's smart, I think makes sense, Will.
Well, my thing was, I do hear what Ms. Crosby is saying, but however, I think if it means that we need to have a special meeting for finances, where we have a meeting where we actually approve this along with contracts, because I believe that once again, it is our responsibilities to be able to know when someone, the people in the community come up to us and ask us a question about what's going on with the money. It is our officer's responsibility to know that sort of thing. It takes for us to have a actual meeting where we just go over finances and we add another board meeting to the agenda, then I see no problem with that, because I understand that y'all do a lot, but I don't wanna, just say, well, because of that, then we have to let it go. No, we still need to know what's going on at $100,000. To me, that's still a lot of money to be to say that you're gonna let the superintendent Bill spend that much money before he has to come to you. I think it's lower than that. So if we have to have a special meeting for that, then I would be inclined to do that, because that's what we signed up for.
Can I summarize what Will said? Are you suggesting that maybe the contracts or the purchases would come through the finance committee? The finance committee would make a recommendation to the full board for them to accept. Is that what you're saying as a way to streamline that?
Well, that would work, that could work as well. Yeah, that'd be great.
David?
I'd just point out, you recommended the Berkeley, and it's 100,000 if it's not budgeted, if it's on a line item budget. Because if it is, as Dick points out, you've already approved it, if you approved it in line item, and as John pointed out, we would have to be a little more diligent on the line item review of the budget in order to make that work. But the 100,000 is only if it wasn't budgeted, so.
Well, that's not really spelled out though. I don't think that's spelled out in
It
this
says
chart.
unlimited of the line item in the budget.
Most of the, other districts provided with excluding the items that have already been approved by line item in the budget, whether it's 8%
And so
referendum.
But that, but
even
Berkeley
if-
doesn't say that though, but Richland
Oh,
does,
wow.
if not included in budget, they,
My copy says that.
oh, I'm looking at Berkeley.
That's what I'm looking
And
at.
mine says 100, under board, 100,000 information only. But right beneath it, Richland says 50,000 if not included in the budget. So some of them are stipulating, some of them aren't. And I suspect Berkeley, I wouldn't be surprised if that is really all at 100,000. I wouldn't be surprised given their recent history.
Yeah.
If they did adopt that, again, I don't think anybody would look at us, given our current and recent past, and really question something a little more conservative. Yes, I do, I hear what Tony's saying, I think maybe a much higher threshold. I like what you're saying, Rachel, about a percentage of the budget, those purchases in
Items not
contract.
included.
Okay, so I really feel, John, did you have one more question?
Do you wanna, I'd entertain a motion, if you'd make a motion to send it to the policy committee, I'm sitting here and I'll put it on the agenda, or if you'd rather go to the full board first, that's fine.
I think this is such a significant change that I think it would have to go to the full board. Normally I would say the policy committee, this is a big change, right, Tanya, that's,
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
work session time, I mean, I don't know that it should be, that we could do it in a board meeting, but a work session,
I would,
Agree.
so that we could really talk about,
Mhm.
because this is really important.
Yeah, it is, very.
but let's bring in
Foundation.
something and get started, right?
Right.
Because you put 11 people in a room and have 11 very different, we won't move. Let's get the conversation started. The board can hack at it all they want, but we've gotta put something on the table to move this forward. That's my sense. And the board can dismiss it. The board can dismiss it completely. They can add to it, they can amend it, they can alter it, but we need something to start with. And I think it should be born out of the finance committee. This is, Tanya's our, point person from the district. And, we would regard any advisement you could give us in a motion that might be wise to include just to get started.
Well, I don't have a recommended motion,
Yeah.
but I would like, as Mr. Strivenger mentioned, consideration of excluding items that are already approved in a line item budget. Just, newer board members may not have been privy to an 8% project list. There may be, I'm not sure how many items on the list, 50 items, $20 million. Each individual item would most likely require to be approved by the board. So every single year, you're gonna have that entire list, and it will cause delays in the construction or the progress of those companies by moving forward, with an item that has already been approved by line item,
Right.
if that were brought back before the board, so.
Point well taken.
That does tie our hands somewhat, so I
Right.
would like some consideration of that.
That would be in the
Being
motion
ready.
verbiage.
And so that to me is very important to be part of the discussion. And, you know, on the larger contracts, we do bring those before the board, the general fund, so how that, have to think some more about how,
Yeah, that one's-
expenditures of the general fund and special revenue would work. But construction really does concern me, as far as, you know, $100,000, that's gonna be every single item that we ever buy in
Well, that comes to us
construction.
automatically anyway, that's already
Comes in a-
established.
Yes.
The major part,
Yeah.
but there's always,
Beyond.
there's always something that comes up, where they find
Right.
something and they need another $40,000 or whatever, and, you know, that's, we have to remember, this is a $240 million operating budget, plus what you spend on capital, we're talking $300-400 million. This isn't the neighborhood grocery store.
No, but these are big budgets in
These
front
are
of
big,
us.
these are big budget items.
And they
But-
don't have some of the background, little bit of baggage we have.
But-
That's not an insult to anybody,
No,
it's just a
but, yeah.
reality, unfortunately.
Just be careful what you ask for.
No, I know, I get it, Ted, and the board would ask for it, we wouldn't
I
care.
understand.
The board would
But
determine
I
that.
can tell you right now, from my view,
Yes.
that coming up with anything that I'm gonna support out of this
Yes,
for me is not gonna happen.
yeah,
Because I don't believe that you are looking at this, cause I've been in her position, and I wasn't shackled, and the president that I worked for wasn't shackled like you are talking about shackling this superintendent, so I'm not gonna buy it. You don't have my vote for a low number. And I
No, well,
understand what Will's saying.
we already said
Yeah.
100,000
That's a low
is
number.
too low, it's too low.
That's too low.
But,
I'd like to move to make a recommendation
let's go
for, superintendent signing authority, for 10% of the total budget, if it's not a line item in the budget. I don't know if I worded that correctly, or what my thought
It
process.
says 24 million.
Sorry, did I say 2%? 1%. Wasn't doing the math right. Sorry. 1%.
1%, not.
Is 2.4 million.
100,000.
Oh no, I'm trying to get it to 250.
Did you mean board signing authority or superintendent? She said superintendent.
Superintendent for, but if it's not a line item, and so adding that in there, so that all of the things that are already there, you know, and they're already going to be vetted and have been vetted, that's not an issue. But I was trying to put a percentage to get it to around 250. But it could, because it's gonna, well, I didn't wanna say 250 because our budget is going to change every year, and you're gonna have a percentage that needs to be consistent year after year, so. I like the percentage also just because of, in one of our previous meetings, we were talking about credit rating authorities and things like that.
0.1% is gonna be, so 385 million would be 0.1% is 385,000.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. Starting there, at least start the conversation there.
0.1%.
And if it, at the work meeting, or workshop meeting, we're able to fluctuate on that number, and, but I think the percentage is what's.
Yeah,
as.
Is this general chapter, does it have to be specific in what budget?
General fund or?
She said all funds
I said
budget.
total.
So we would, total budget, so it would be
Total, but special
prior
revenue,
year's
that's
total
what-
budget or something.
special revenue, capital project, everything.
I would, well, I'm not gonna
Well, I'm
modify your
just
motion,
What
but I
was
would,
the question?
I was just, the budget, you have like multiple budgets, special
Yes.
revenue, general fund,
Yes.
capital project.
If not,
Yeah,
but
there's
you
multiple
added,
budgets.
if not included in the budget, correct? That verbiage is in there.
the
If
total
not-
we're talking about, these totals include all funds,
Right.
so, all
Right,
funds
all-
budget,
all budgeted
all
funds.
funds. This is 385 million,
Right.
for us.
I think
This
it
year.
gives, I think it gives us a starting point to discuss it. I think the percentage is more safe and allowing flexibility. I think, making sure that you say the line item in the budget also doesn't restrict us or restrict the superintendent as much. I think it's a good starting point for us to discuss it at the work session.
Robin, what do you have for the motion? We don't have a second
Recommend-
yet, but I
It
wanna
wasn't
hear
very
the motion.
clear. Recommendation on the superintendent sign the authority of 0.1% of total budget is not a line item.
Is that correct? That sounds like the different things I said.
It's not a line item in budget.
0.1% puts us at 385 right now for conversational purposes, but.
I will second that motion under protest. I think it's something that really needs to be discussed a lot more, but as a start point, I am not endorsing that number or that percentage.
No, and a second does not mean you're endorsing it.
I was trying to get the
I
number,
understand.
I was trying to get the percentage low enough to hit it
understand.
on the
Yeah.
comment.
And I just to move forward with
Yes.
that, and I'll second it.
Point taken. All right. All in favor? Well, all in favor of the motion? Raise your hand. Now, I just have a process question. Robin, this is gonna go on Tuesday night's agenda under committee reports. I would like to see us take this and what kind of room do we have on the, work session agenda left? You would know,
We haven't started.
You haven't started yet.
We haven't started
We
yet.
only have a couple of items so far, so we haven't put the agenda.
okay, we could have a motion that directly routes it
To
to
the work
the
session.
work session for a full board meeting, okay?
So moved.
I can't make it.
Okay, I
So
move.
you're asking this,
I
instead of
move
going on
to-
Tuesdays, you want this to
We're
move
routing it to the work
Okay.
session. Tuesday's not,
I move that we add this discussion to the agenda of the next work session in
Second.
April.
all in favor of the motion? All right, David,
Was that motion to recommend to the board?
Yes,
always.
always.
That is part of our
always
agenda.
I was like, well, the first I said,
No, the second one is not to
Second
recommend
one,
it
no,
to
no,
the
that's
board.
just-
You think that this committee can assign it to the work
We
session?
have to recommend it.
Because
To
you're
the
breaking new ground
officers.
if you do that.
Well, recommended to the officers,
Just do
Or
it.
to the,
place it on
yep,
top.
recommend to the officers and, yeah,
Well, with all due respect, the officers are bending the existing policies.
I know, but you're wrong, so make it right, you know.
Alright, anyway, moving on, where's our next, sorry, Will.
Hey, I'm gonna say, hey, wait, I am present here.
Alright, so moving on to the next topic, Tanya, or E-rate application
Yes,
authorization.
this is a standard, procedure we go through each year, and we actually went through it recently with the category 1 applications. So, just as a reminder, E-rate is a federal program. It is offered through the, FCC, the Federal Communication Commission, as a program that assists, provides funding to schools and libraries. There are several categories. They're reimbursed at several different rates. Category 2 has an 80% discount rate, so we are reimbursed at that level, but we must participate, by 20% of the purchases that we make. So, it does require board approval, which is basically our commitment to fund the 20% of the match that is required. And, the amount is projected, the total request is $157,000. We expect the maximum we can get reimbursed for is $126,000, so it appears that there will be a reimbursement of about $31,000. These are for, wireless access points, which are, I don't see one in here, but it's a little box that handles the wireless internet, and transmits that, and basic maintenance on internal connections like switches in the closets. You can't generally see items; they're usually tucked behind the walls and in technology closets. But they are very important to making sure we have the technology we need. So I just would love a motion to move forward, and one is provided at the bottom of the document I provided.
I move that we recommend to the board to accept the authorization for E-rate year 2019 category 2 applications authorization.
A second?
All in favor of the motion? Last but not least, future agenda topics.
I'd like to propose that the future agenda topic be the current revenue estimates for the general fund. If you remember in our last quarterly report, the revenue estimate, revenue actual came in was below what came in last year. I'd like to give an update at the next meeting and discuss any actions that may have to be recommended to the board if that continues, if our revenue continues to fall below what was estimated, then that's gonna be something we need to talk about.
Yeah. And then Tanya, you have a couple topics that we have to tackle next meeting, correct? Our
Minority business enterprise report,
minority business report.
that should be relatively short.
Okay, and there was another one we did.
Budget update was the last one, but
We're gonna get
I'm
that
not, you're gonna
Tuesday.
get that on Tuesday, so.
Okay, were there any others that you had, that were time
No, that we had
sensitive?
4, and so, budget, minority, E-rate,
And the ESSA figures that Dick
yes,
requested.
yes, and I
We'll have a
provided
month to review them. Do you wanna put that on the April agenda?
There's some more, yes, I
Yes.
would like to, there's
That's a
some
big
more,
agenda.
there's some more, that I talked to Ms. Crosby about,
I have a question.
I got it.
Yes.
I have 3.
Okay, three, and we'll ration them out. We'll
Yeah,
see.
yeah,
We'll try and
because one of
get
them is
the
probably
ESSA.
rather large. So one of mine is, it's my understanding that we haven't had a grants officer, anybody writing grants beyond just teachers doing their own for about 3 years, and that could go possibly to, what Dick is talking about. I'd like to see the impact that has had towards our additional monies that is coming in.
We have to be the grants officer. What else?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to quantify
Yeah.
that.
I guess you probably would have to look at what that individual who was here secured for us. Maybe over a 3-year time period or something, average out what they were bringing in, and then see how we've fallen, possibly.
What
Is that
else do you
perfect?
have?
Okay, the other thing I have, we recently were just talking about the Leader in Me program and its costs. I'd like to look at other program costs so that we could have that conversation about efficacy with them too, because I don't think it's fair just to focus on one program.
That's true, but get specific for us. Pick one. Are you
International
looking for a
Fair
full-blown audit
you
of a
know,
program?
Not a full-blown audit, but something similar to what Tanya has done, just so that we can
Yeah.
kind of look
Why not
at our
do them all?
programs as a whole. Yeah, I mean,
Why
I
not
hate
do them
to
all?
cherry pick anyone, but you know, the ones that come to the top of my head, IB.
Well, you wanna do IB?
Let's start, we can start there. I just think a review of all the programs,
IB program.
the cost implications of them is important.
And you're talking about
All of
all 3,
I think
the primary years, the middle years, and the diploma program, all 3? of the IB, full program?
As
Okay.
full, cause I think, Leader and me also was looking at high school,
Okay.
so.
Alright,
Um,
quick answer,
hey,
we
that's
can't,
what, we
can't
can't
get into
I need-
discussing
I
it,
need-
you
yeah.
would need time for that.
I'm gonna need,
Right.
Yes, that would
these
not
are quite
likely
a
be
number of
next
items,
month.
and we're
Yeah.
building budget,
Gotcha,
so.
understood, and Rachel, you had the third.
yes, and the last one stems from,
Yes.
TUDAC that we just went to, obviously everybody's aware of the current educational reform that's going through, the, additional monies that are coming for teacher salaries. I think it would be, beneficial for us to look at costs and how we could also supplement teacher salaries or bring up teacher salaries, because I don't have the figures right in front of me, but teacher salaries are going up by a certain percentage from the state, which obviously is going to bring us up as a whole, but,
If we get it from the state.
yeah, if it's finalized, right?
I'll have an update on that on Tuesday night.
Right,
Great.
so,
Okay.
looking at administration costs, and where we could possibly create my idea, my very bold idea is creating a match of whatever the state increase is.
Okay.
It's bold, it's big, yeah, I know.
I think I got all
But
three, and Dave, I
it's a
have
starting
yours.
point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It makes us competitive.
Just so that we have the current revenue estimates, update, minority business report, and ESSA.
Thanks, I thought it was the.
Under Rachel's grant writers, other program costs with the full IB, full program,
Mhm.
administrative costs, or did you call it to that? I mean,
How
what
to
was
sup-
the-
how we
Okay.
might supplement teacher salaries, building on what you learned at
The idea,
TUDA.
the idea was to match what the state increase would be.
Alright, so, and I have not received any, topics from our three officers, thank you, cause we are front loaded.
Well,
We have a
well,
lot
actually,
here.
I was gonna ask, I would like to know, being that also that we're coming under the, time of getting out the contracts and getting out constructions and all that, I would also like to know, how many, you said something about minorities, how many African American minorities actually have contracts dealing with the district? I would like to know, what those companies are.
We have-
and-
we have
and-
the
They're in the report.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
have,
there'll be
there's
a report.
an annual report that has to be filled out.
Right, I'm talking about, she said she was gonna come, and from my understanding, you said you were gonna tell them next time about,
In April.
Yes, we have a semi-annual reporting,
right,
that's required of the procurement code, and
Right.
I'll come, next finance committee meeting and bring that document.
right,
And it will provide, information about, minority vendors, women-owned businesses, and what vendors.
and could you also make another area of African American,
It's already in there.
I know, but when you say minorities, a woman can be a
It says
minority.
African American.
Both.
Well, I'm not hiding it.
Women and,
Right, well, I'm not hiding, that's the area that I'm focused on, and I wanna see, because I have a lot of them who are telling me, and who are saying that, listen,
Well, save it-
it's
save it
not
for
fair.
April.
I want to be known,
Because I
okay,
wanna hear.
right, and I wanna let y'all know that, that is something that we need to be looking for, so I'm gearing up y'all mindsets, and I to know that it's coming, and that's something that we need to be focused on as well.
Alright, we have no more other topics on the agenda
So I was
this
just,
evening.
I was just telling him that.
Yeah, well, let's adjourn and then you can, tell him. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I so moved.
Okay.
Second.
You have to